copyright, because we upload them on YouTube, copyright infringements won't allow us to record our videos to store them, as YouTube is our storage base. So yeah, but I'm recording now. And all right, so question. What did that video did everybody get a chance to see the video, first of all?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. What did the video represent? Let me go back a little bit and help us out. Give me 1 second.
Represent that we're in warfare.
All right. Yes, it does.
Getting ready and prepared.
All right, it does. Everybody can see the video, right? I mean, the screen. Everybody see?
Yeah, I can.
All right, excellent, excellent. All right, so yes, it represents we're in warfare. All right, now there's a meaning. What does the video represent? And I know we just answered that.
We are defeating the enemy.
Yes, but it's a symbol of something. What is it? What is the video a symbol of?
Satanic coming together.
All right. It's the meaning of it.
Believers coming together in prayer.
Yep, those are signs or descriptions inside of the video, but what does the video itself represent a symbol of? The video is an instrument. Let me give you that hint. The video is a tool. And it's a resemblance of another tool.
Show we're overcomers, overcome them.
Not the meaning of the video. The meaning of the video may show that we're overcomers, but the video itself is a tool.
We overcome the enemy by our testimony.
Well, once again, we're describing meanings. We're not describing a tool that's symbolic of another tool that's used in the Bible, that's used by Jesus, that's taught to his disciples, a tool or study method or technique. The video is symbolic of a tool itself.
Oh, a parable?
Yes. Yes. Look at it. Look at it. The parable is watch this, a dramatized illustration of another reality. You guys kept describing the reality, the meaning, the spiritual meaning. You kept describing the spiritual meaning, but this video is a tool. It's a parable. It's Lecrae's way of teaching a parable about defeating the enemy. Look at the darts. The darts represents the confusion the enemy sends out to believers. Every time they punch one of those flames of fire, it represents clear interpretation. I'm totally clear on what God means and what he wants me to do so I can reach success. And at some moment, me hitting, watch this, the teachings of God that hits the mark destroys the enemy. So watch what happens.
My records, my money, my Grammys, I'm still gonna die richer than you can imagine. Jesus the king, I'm his prophet. Send me to Nineveh, I get it popping. They see an interview, swear I ain't with it. I say come see what I do in my city. From cooling with Kendrick to walking through Romans with people in prison. Let me stop talking, cause man, I've been did it. Can't let my left hand on my right position. Y'all just gonna have to see when I trans.
All right. So when we think about how important interpretations of parables are, this video is a good representation of that. Because if you can't interpret a parable or interpret scripture, you can never defeat the enemy. Reflections, thoughts, and comments. And all of this will be revealed as we exhaustively look at the detailed meaning of a parable. Remember, a parable is a dramatized illustration of another reality. That's what this video is. Matter of fact, that's what most videos are. All right. This one just so happens to represent these could be seen as would-be disciples. The darts coming at them are oppositions and training, oppositions of their training, right? These gloves can represent the fact that they have been successfully trained with the weapons to interpret. And once they interpret, each flame is destroyed. The flame can represent misunderstanding, and each misunderstanding is defeated with an interpretation. All right, because misunderstanding leads us astray. All right, misunderstanding leads us astray. The more we're able to interpret God's meaning of his scriptures and parables, we're able to hit the mark. And as long as we're hitting the mark, the enemy is defeated. Comments, questions, or thoughts before we move on? Make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. That was a good explanation of all that.
All right. Yeah. And again, go ahead, Brother Will.
Well, no, your teaching make all the sense in the world, because you never stray from your foundation. You have built a foundation with us, and you steady building on it, but you steady going back to what you done taught us over and over, and now it makes so much sense that I think when we sit here and listen to you, we just be in awe, because what you just showed me in that video, I didn't see that at all. You know, but now I got that video because I was listening to it the first time I heard it. Now I'm finna go, when we get off this call, I'm finna play it over and over till I get and see that. But your explanation and your understanding of telling us, you keep us grounded. You keep me grounded, because I never do get to the end. I always got a comma when it comes to you, because you don't never put a period nowhere.
All right.
You keep going back, and I appreciate that. I'm learning.
All right.
And I'll say this right quick, is if you don't mind.
No problem. No problem.
One of the greatest things that was said to me y'all probably know, we went to the Trotman conference over the weekend. One of the greatest things that a person said to me when I was in a small group, and they got up and told me, "Man, you sound just like Soup." And I say, "Well, I'm sounding like Keusa, but y'all ain't never heard Keusa. But that's where I'm getting my teaching from." That was great. That was showing me disciple making in this footage, you know, the way it's supposed to be. Because when I look back over it, I was sounding just like you. I was repeating everything you say. And why did I know everything you say word for word? I was amazed at my own self.
Right,
but thank you, teacher.
All right. Repetitious usages and practices. And that's what this example was about. But to explain, last weekend, I think I mentioned to a lot of you guys, there's this male conference in Louisiana area, about 2 hours outside of Ruston. It's a disciple-making, spiritual reproduction conference called the Trotman Conference. Dawson Trotman, in the early 40s, late 40s, during World War II, was a Navy SEAL. A Navy a military person who invested in one person, and eventually he had 6 key men that he invested, disciple-making principles. And before the end of the war, they said over 200 and some people had actually received the gospel of Christ because of this one man's investment in 6 men during the World War, Second World War. And so he's often noted as one of the first and earliest American pioneers of disciple making. And so this conference, has generations of downlines from Dawson Trotman's initial investment. And we've been a part of that for about 5 years now. And during this conference, there are small groups. There's 4 Fridays, there's 2 small groups. Saturday, there's 2 small groups. And everybody in the conference are placed in small groups. And there's about 4 to 6 individuals in each conference, each small group. And each small group has a small group leader. And that's what Will is talking about. The goal is to kind of walk with your small group, to bond, to discuss, and talk through 2 scriptures. One scripture is discussed on Friday with small group, and one scripture is discussed on Saturday with small groups. And that's what he's referring to, those small groups from the Trotman Conference. But thanks, Brother Will. Appreciate you. Those are encouraging words as well. And so if you guys didn't catch it, what Will was saying is, they said he sounded like Soup, and these are guys who aren't a part of our group from other places who know Soup, but however, they may or may not be familiar with myself, but yet Will has sat under the teachings that I've shared with him and was reflecting on that. And then they skip a generation, that's what it is, and says, hey, you remind me of him. And they had no idea of the generation that had taught Will. And that's a great representation of the disciple-making downline from 2 Timothy 2:2, if you're not familiar with it. So appreciate it, Brother Will. Appreciate it. All right. What I want to do is emphasize how important knowing how to interpret a parable can be. Your interpretations of parables leads to your interpretations of scriptures that leads to your success, spiritual success over the enemy in life, because there are many applications but one interpretation, and the interpretation leads to spiritual success. Spiritual success leads to our ability to defeat the enemy in every area of our lives. And without it, the enemy wins. So interpreting parables are more important to us than we give it credit. So with that said, let's look at what a parable means, because if we're going to learn how to interpret parables, which we've already begun the journey, whether we see it or not, as I gave an example, it's kind of like the Karate Kid when Danielson kept talking to Mr. Miyagi about learning how to defend and fight, and Mr. Miyagi goes out, gets him some wax, a wax pad, and tell him to wax a vehicle. He has no clue that that's a foundational teaching to begin to learn how to defend himself, until Mr. Miyagi approaches him and swings, and all of a sudden he does the wax on, wax off defense, right? So a lot of times what we're learning has everything to do with the goal. We just don't understand the basic principles in it. And that's what is important. For you to be successful at anything, an athlete, if he's not rooted and grounded in the basic fundamentals of that particular sport, there is no success. The talent means nothing without the fundamentals. And that's what we're learning here, fundamentals of interpretations. All right. Any comments or questions before we move on? All right. So let's keep tracking. So this is what I want to do. All right. I want you guys to tune in. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to repeat myself a few times, but I'm going to walk us from beginning to end through an exhaustive explanation of what a parable is. Now, this is from a biblical perspective. This is from a biblical worldview. All right, because parables were used in every area of life. Like we just saw, most videos are dramatized story illustrations. But this parable explanation and definition is from a biblical worldview. We got to keep that in mind. All right. And so here we go. All right, here we go. And just so you'll know, I'm familiar with this, but my review on parables took me at least 2 hours, literally from start to finish. And that's me kind of reviewing, reading through some notes, man, just kind of making sure. But my personal review to try to put together this exhaustive definition of a parable took me literally 2 hours. All right. And so here we go. All right. And what I like to do first is read the text. So let me pull up the text so we can see why. All right. Let me go back. And what I like for somebody to do is to read verse 7 through 11 for us in just a moment. Anybody want to volunteer to read verse 7 through 11?
I got it.
All right.
Okay. Let me put on my glasses. We in chapter 14, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Luke chapter 14, verse 7 through 11.
7 to 11. You ready?
Yes, sir.
Now he told a parable to those. Oh, wait, you got it up here on the screen.
No, that's fine.
And he began.
Either way you're comfortable, it's fine with me.
Okay. Well, now he told a parable to those who was invited. When he noticed how they chose the places of honor, saying to them, when you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in a place of honor. Let someone more distinguished than you be invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say to you, give your place to this person. And then you will begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sat at the table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted.
All right, excellent, excellent, excellent. And so we've been studying this for several weeks, probably a couple of months now. But what's important is the verse leads off by saying he began speaking a parable to the invited guests. We know that he represents Jesus. So Jesus was the teacher. He's the rabbi. He's the one giving the parable. But if we're going to understand anything he said after he spoke the parable, we first have to understand completely what a parable is. All right. And so I want you guys to listen up. If you're taking notes, I want you to tune in to take great notes. So in the Bible, when we see Jesus say, we see Dr. Luke say Jesus spoke a parable, the New Testament in our Bible was written in the Greek language originally. So the original language that this particular English translation was translated from was the Greek language. And in the Greek language, Parable is parabole. Somebody spell it for us.
Parabole.
All right, parabole, Parabole. That's the Greek word in our New Testament scriptures for parable. It's a two-part word. First part is what?
Para, alongside.
All right, and spell para for us.
Para,
All right, what does it mean again?
alongside.
And para means alongside. And para is where we get our English word parallel from. So when we talk about on alongside, we got parallel to, and something alongside represents a comparison. All right, a comparison. We got to get that. Second part of parabole is bole. Somebody spell it for us.
B-O, I believe it's two L's, Casey, B-O-L-L-E.
All right, okay. And again, it may be parabole or B-O-L-E, and the reason being it's a transliteration. We're doing our best to capture in English consonants and vowels, in the Greek, alphabetized system. So it's kind of hard. All right, let me do this. All right, so it's kind of hard. All right, but we want to understand bole, B-O-L-L-E, or you can spell it B-O-L-E. And what does bole mean?
To throw.
All right, to throw, or what else? To throw, or what else?
To cast.
Yes, to throw or to cast. All right, so we want to get that. Parabole means to throw or cast alongside, parallel, or to throw or cast a comparison alongside of something. I'll say that again. Parabole then means to throw or cast a comparison alongside of something. To throw or cast a comparison alongside of something. Let me give it to you in another way. To throw or cast alongside in order to make a comparison. Let me give it to you in another way. To throw or cast alongside in order to make a comparison. And so now we know that the teacher who's using a parable is throwing something alongside in order to make a comparison of something else. Now, let me explain this in a definition. A spiritual comparison parallel to a moral truth or a cultural truth. A spiritual comparison parallel to a moral truth or a cultural truth. I'll say it again. A spiritual comparison parallel to a moral truth or a cultural truth. One more time. A spiritual comparison parallel to a moral truth or a cultural truth. All right. And just to explain to those of you who may have tuned in a little after I gave a narrative of why we're doing this, is because we want to have on file, recorded in our database for our hearing or future hearing, the complete exhaustive definition of what a parable is in its entirety from beginning to end. All right. And that's what we're doing. And this is review. And so that means when if you've been in a consistent teaching group with me, once I give a complete and exhaustive definition of something, there's an expectation for you to in turn to repeat that in a teaching setting back to the group. So we're setting ourselves up to finalize our understanding and learning of what a parable is. Then we'll move into the interpretation of the parable at hand. All right. So once again, a spiritual comparison parallel to a moral truth or a cultural truth. Here's another definition. To throw or cast an illustration of a moral truth. To throw or cast an illustration of a moral truth parallel to a comparison of a spiritual interpretation. Let me give you that again. To throw or cast an illustration of a moral truth parallel to a comparison of a spiritual interpretation / meaning. All right, and I'm going to repeat it again. And I want you guys not to fret because this is being recorded. But I would advise not to relax and say, because it's being recorded, I don't have to try to dictate now. If you don't try to catch up with it now, you created a gap in your learning process. All right. You created a gap in your learning process and your ability to have the greatest capacity for retention. You have to train your mind in repetition. Watch this. In usage of all 5 senses. So taste may not be available here, but touch, feel, sight, and hearing is. And the only way you're going to activate touch is by you using your finger to touch a keyboard or a pen and putting it on paper to write down these words. And as you write them down, you're using sight, hearing, and all the other senses besides taste. All right. And so let me give you that definition again. To throw or cast an illustration of a moral truth. To throw or cast an illustration of a moral truth parallel to a comparison. Parallel to a comparison of a spiritual interpretation / meaning. Somebody give that back to the group.
To cast or throw an illustration of a moral truth parallel to a comparison of a spiritual interpretation / meaning.
Yes, good, excellent. Thanks, Wynn, thanks. All right, next definition. A parable most of the time uses a moral truth. A parable most of the time uses a moral truth. A parable most of the time uses a moral truth parallel to teach spiritual interpretations. I'll say it again, still a little more I hadn't said. A parable most of the time uses a moral truth parallel to teach spiritual interpretations by way of comparison. All right, let me give you that again. A parable most of the time uses a moral truth parallel to teach spiritual interpretations by way of comparison. One more time. A parable most of the time uses a moral truth parallel to teach spiritual interpretations by way of comparison. Somebody get that back to us.
A parable most of the time uses a moral truth parallel to teach spiritual interpretations by way of comparison.
Excellent, excellent. Now add this little caveat at the end. The moral truth and the spiritual interpretations are simultaneous. The moral truth and the spiritual interpretations are simultaneous. It means as soon as I give the moral truth, simultaneously I give the spiritual interpretation. The moral truth and the spiritual interpretations are simultaneous.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, we did it. So as soon as Jesus says a wedding feast, that's a moral truth. Everyone is familiar with a wedding feast. We're familiar with a wedding feast in our culture. We're familiar with a wedding feast. The wedding feast is the banquet ceremony after the wedding. But simultaneously, as soon as he said wedding feast, he actually gave the spiritual interpretation of the table of the righteous or the table of the Almighty in the afterlife. It happened simultaneous. As soon as he said wedding feast, the spiritual interpretation was given. And everybody in that culture immediately, if they didn't know anything else about what he was trying to convey, they immediately knew. Soon as wedding feast came off the tip of his tongue, they knew immediately he was talking about the banquet with the Lord Almighty in the afterlife or the life to come. Does that help, John?
Very good. Thank you very much.
All right. All right, here we go. One more definition. Well, a lot more. Let me not say one more. We got a lot more to go. All right. All right, here we go. The use of an illustration. Let me start. A parable. Every time I give a definition, we're still talking about a parable. So to save time in writing, you don't have to say a parable. I'm just letting you know I hadn't changed my thought or my intention. A parable is the use of an illustration. A parable is the use of an illustration that is cast alongside of a spiritual meaning. A parable is the use of an illustration that is cast alongside of a spiritual meaning. A parable is the use of an illustration that is cast alongside of a spiritual meaning. One more time. A parable is the use of an illustration that is cast alongside of a spiritual meaning. Now, let me give you some encouragement for those of you who are writing frantically and keeping up and taking notes. The video we saw earlier, that's you with your gloves on. Your notepad and your pencil represents you putting your gloves on. And every time you complete a sentence represents you punching that flame out on the video. All right, so keep going. Keep going. All right, it's going to pay off. You guys saw what happened at the end after they punched them flames so much. It's going to pay off, so keep punching. So let me give you this definition again. the use of an illustration that is cast alongside of spiritual meaning. A parable is the use of an illustration that is cast alongside of a spiritual meaning. Somebody give it back to us.
A parable is the use of an illustration that is cast alongside a spiritual meaning.
All right, then. All right, all right. Here we go. See, once one person got it, I can move on. All right, because if somebody else, if something happens to me, at least you can refer back to that one person. All right. So here we go. We must understand the paradigm of the audience. All right, let me give you that again. This is what I mean. To understand a parable, we must understand the paradigm of the audience the original teacher and students lived in. All right, let me say that again. We must understand the paradigm of the audience the original teacher and students lived in. So we got to understand the paradigm of the original audience, in other words. We have to.
I have a question.
Yes.
So is that to create a parable, or are you just talking about how to understand the ones that's in the Bible?
To interpret great question. Great question. To interpret the parables of the Bible, to interpret the parables of anybody. See, a parable, remember what we just wrote, a parable is a moral truth compared to a spiritual meaning. So whatever that moral truth is represented in the culture of the original audience. We can't take the moral truth of our culture and apply it to that audience to understand the meaning. The moral truth was given in the culture and the time frame the audience was hearing it. So we got to take the paradigm of the original audience so we can grasp the moral truth of what the moral truth meant to them, just like the wedding. See, a wedding feast to us in this culture wouldn't reflect back immediately to the afterlife, to the table of the Almighty. Not in our culture, but in their culture, they understood and they practiced that a wedding represented being at the table of the Almighty, at the banquet feast of the Almighty. All right. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
All right. All right. So once again, we must understand the paradigm of the audience the original teacher and students lived in if we're going to interpret the parables of the Bible. Somebody get that back to us.
We must understand the paradigm of the audience to understand. This is what I got messed up though. To understand the parable. That's all I got.
Right. We'll help you out. That's what we're here for.
I got
Somebody
it.
else help out.
We must understand the paradigm of the audience the original teacher and students lived in if we are to interpret the parables of the Bible.
All right, give it to her one more time, John.
We must understand the paradigm of the audience the original teacher and students lived in if we are to interpret the parables of the Bible. Let me give it to you one more time. I think I read that funny. We must understand the paradigm of the audience and that the original teacher and students lived in if we are to interpret the parables of the Bible.
Excellent. Excellent.
Thank you.
All right. All right, let's keep moving. Let's keep moving. The rabbinic community of the Hebrew culture called parables handles of Torah. The rabbinic community of the Hebrew culture called parables, handles of Torah. Say it again. The rabbinic community of the Hebrew culture called parables, handles of Torah. The rabbinic community of the Hebrew culture called parables, handles of Torah. Say it one more time. The rabbinic community of the Hebrew culture called parables, handles of Torah. Somebody else give it back to us.
The rabbinic community of the Hebrew culture called parables, the handles of Torah.
All right.
The
excellent.
rabbinic community of the Hebrew culture called parables, the handles of Torah. And if y'all get tired of me reading, just tell me to shut up and I'll let somebody else go.
Let me tell you what happened. I'm going to assume none of you are disinterested or tired or disengaged. And let me explain why. We've built up in our hearts and minds the importance of learning what parables mean, and therefore we're all locked in. We've done that. Whether we know it or not, we've done that over the course of these several weeks. And so we're locked in, right? We see the importance of this. And also, this is what else. We're excited about the opportunity to learn the skill to interpret these. So if this is the beginning of this, I'm willing to do it. I've increased my stamina and capacity for this. And that's what happened over time. All right. So give it to us one more time, John.
The rabbinic community of the Hebrew culture called parables, the handles of Torah.
Excellent, excellent, excellent.
Quick question.
All right.
So the handles of Torah, is that like when I think of a handle, is like holding something up, or is it the parables and handles of Torah? Like I don't know what they meant by that, I guess.
Yeah, yes. And we're getting ready to explain, but
Okay.
you got it. So when something that has a handle, for me to grab it to hold it up first for if it's going to hold something else, I first have to grab hold to the handles to hold it up, right? But yes, yes, yes.
Wow.
Or they would grab hold of the handles and draw it to themselves. All right. So they would grab hold of the handles that's given in order to draw it to themselves. That's one of the reasons why they refer to parables as handles of Torah. It was an easy way to grab hold to the meaning of Torah and draw it unto yourself. Let me explain that again. The reason why they refer to the parables as handles of Torah is because it was a way they could grab hold to the handles of the meaning and draw it to themselves for understanding. The reason why they called it or referred to parables as handles of Torah, it was because they had a way to grab hold to the handles of the meaning and draw it to themselves for understanding. All right. Somebody run that back to us.
Mr. John?
I'll give it to us again.
All right, I got it here.
Okay.
The reason why they referred to parables as the handles of Torah is because they could grab hold of the meaning and draw it to themselves.
One more time.
The reason why they referred to parables as the handles of Torah is because they could grab hold of the meaning and draw it to themselves. The reason why they referred to parables as the handles of Torah is because they could grab hold of the meaning and draw it to themselves.
All right, anybody else? Somebody else. Everybody doing their best to keep up and waiting on the recording, huh?
I think some of us write faster than others, Casey.
Well, Casey, I graduated from high school with a D minus, right? And listening to you as being a English major sound like I'm having trouble writing down some of these words correctly. So I got, from now on, when I start studying with you, teacher, I'm gonna have to bring a Hebrew dictionary and an American dictionary with me.
I got you. And it makes sense.
Yeah, I need that.
Hey, Will, I'll tell you
Yes,
what I've learned working with Casey is I've got this dictionary app downloaded on my telephone. And when he starts going, a lot of times I have to flip over and look up a meaning to a word. I didn't know what parsing a verb was until I met Casey. And so apparently me and you had the same English class, made about the same grades. So yeah, it's like you can't teach you can be an old dog and learn some new tricks.
Oh yeah. And again, let me tell you what I do. I write it down when I'm taking notes. I don't worry about correct spelling because I know if I spelled it incorrect, I know what it means. I go back later and correct the spelling. I do that with my own notes of myself. Like this morning, the last thing I did is I went back through all of the words to check the spelling. So even when I'm taking notes, preparing a study, I don't even worry about spelling right at that moment because I know what I'm trying to say, right? So yeah, but I get it, and that's a normal struggle, but I get it. All right. But the beauty of this is we now see the value of the recording, and I want to give these out to us so we can have it as a database. So if we're training and teaching and learning about a parable, we got an exhaustive meaning of it, to reference it, to totally immerse ourselves in what it means. And then we can better apply the meaning of learning the skill of it. All right. So that's what we're doing. All right. That's what we're doing. And hopefully it helps. All right. Give it to us one more time, John.
Okay. The reason why they referred to parables as the handles of Torah is because they could grab hold of the meaning and draw it to themselves.
All right.
And when we refer to they, that's the rabbinic community.
Yeah. All right. Let's keep moving. This is going to be hard to dictate, so I'll say it again a couple of times, but I would recommend listening first, and then I'm going to repeat it 3 times for you to write. All right, so listen first, and then I'll repeat it 3 times for you to write. One famous rabbi in Jewish history named Ben Akiva once said, "A teaching without a parable is like a basket with no handles. You have nothing to grab hold to and draw unto yourself." Let me repeat it one more time just for you to hear before you try to write. One famous rabbi in Jewish history named Ben Akiva once said, "A teaching without a parable is like a basket with no handles. You have nothing to grab hold to and draw unto yourself." Now let me repeat it 3 times for you to dictate and write. One famous rabbi in Jewish history One famous rabbi in Jewish history named Ben Akiva. One famous rabbi in Jewish history named Ben Akiva once said, one famous rabbi in Jewish history named Ben Akiva once said, one famous rabbi in Jewish history named Ben Akiva once said, a teaching without a parable. Once said, a teaching without a parable is like a basket with no handles. A teaching without a parable is like a basket with no handles. One famous rabbi in Jewish history named Ben Akiva once said, a teaching without a parable is like a basket with no handles. You have nothing to grab hold to and draw unto yourself. Let me repeat it. One famous rabbi in Jewish history named Ben Akiva once said, a teaching without a parable is like a basket with no handles. You have nothing to grab hold to and draw unto yourself. A teaching without a parable is like a basket with no handles. You have nothing to grab hold to and draw unto yourself. Somebody give it back to us.
One famous rabbi in Jewish history named Ben Akiva once said, a teaching without a parable is like a basket with no handle. You have nothing to grab hold to and draw unto yourself.
I would have won my own bet against myself, Brother Will, on this one. I said, watch Brother Will be the first one to explain it this time. And I won that bet.
Hey, Casey.
Yes, sir.
I remember, the story about Ben Akiva. He was one that, was coming back home from his original rabbinic trip, and he heard his wife say, "I don't care if he stays another 15 years." And he turned right around and went back.
12 years, yes.
Was he pre-Christ or
post?
Because it's
post.
He was after Christ. Okay.
Yeah, post. So probably in Christ's latter years, Ben Akiva was that probably was the time he had not went back to or studied to be a disciple, but post, yes, post. And remember, a lot of these things were being coined during Christ's life, so to speak. Like we're talking about the titling of referring to parables as handles of Torah. That was something that was understood and said, but it was being fixated as Christ lived, so to speak. All right.
Casey,
Yes.
is it Ben Akiva or Ben Akiva? Is it two names or one?
All right. Ben would be what we call the first name, which literally means son of. So any student of a rabbi or rabbi to title it, it would be son of Akiva, which is what it really means. Ben represents son of, and that's not necessarily his real name, but you always see Ben in front of it. Like you'll see Ben Simone or Ben Hillel, which means son of Hillel, son of Akiva. So Akiva, A-K-I-V-A, is actually his first name, which is the second part of it. But Ben Akiva is how he was known in their culture. B-E-N, first word, second word, A-K-I-V-A.
Thank
you. All right, no problem. So somebody else running back to us.
One famous rabbi in Jewish history named Ben Akiva once said, "A teaching without a parable is like a basket with no handles. You have nothing to grab hold to. You have nothing to grab hold to draw it to yourself."
All right. Excellent, excellent. All right, let's keep going. So basically, therefore, the term handles of Torah was coined. Therefore, the term handles of Torah was coined. Therefore, the term handles of Torah was coined. Now, anytime you see a parable, a parable, and someone says handles of Torah, you know they're referring to parables. Handles of Torah refers to parables. Handles of Torah refers to parables. Somebody repeat it back to us.
Therefore, the term handles of Torah was coined. Handles of Torah refers to parables.
All right, great. And let me explain something. This is exactly how I teach when I'm doing trainings, internationally and domestic. If I'm there for a moment with a group for a few days, I teach in this manner, so when I leave, I know they got it. I know truth has been transferred. The second part of life transferred is spending those few days with them, interacting, engaging, fellowshipping, eating, talking, discussing, answering questions, laughing and joking, traveling is the life transference. But this is the truth transference. And this is an example of how you transfer truth where it stays where you leave from. All right.
Okay, Houston.
Yes, sir.
I don't mean to put a damper on things to you. You're doing a great job.
No problem.
But man, I'm kind of like getting angry.
All right,
because
then.
Why I wasn't taught this in church before? If I would have been taught this way in church before, brother, I could have saved myself a lot of headaches. I could have saved my family a lot of headaches. Now I got all this training in this truth, and I got to take my time and listen to you thoroughly, because what you saying and what you teaching me, I see that this is what I was missing in my life. So why is this now? And you, why wasn't taught in churches before? And why is not taught in churches right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's righteous indignation to desire something previously and not have it. But the answer of why it wasn't is because the person who taught you didn't know it, or didn't know to do it, or is not aware of what to do to be this effective. There's absence. They probably weren't taught themselves, or they probably weren't taught in this way themselves. So this is what we learn. We only can run to the limits of our light. Let me say that again. We can only run to the limits of our own life. I'll interpret that in a second. We can only run to the limits of our own light. I'll say it again. We can only run to the limits of our own light. As soon as the light ends, we have no place to go. Light represents understanding. We can only explain what we understand. When my understanding is limited, I have nothing else to explain to someone else. So we can only run to the limits of our own light. And what we've done and what God have done is he's illuminated you to this. He's illuminated me to this, which gives us more light, which gives us more sight, which creates understanding. And understanding is learning. Understanding is learning. And I'm glad we have a recording because I probably can't repeat all of that word for word again. But I totally understand it. But we can only run to the limits of our own light. And light equals or equals understanding. So we can only explain from knowledge what we understand. If not, it represents a diminished view, a lack of light. Illumination represents light. God illuminates us to the truth. They were probably never illuminated to this aspect of this truth. But we just thank God today for his grace was sufficient for at this moment, he gave us the opportunity to be illuminated.
K. Houston.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, brother. You just calmed me down right
All right,
there.
then.
Because I was getting ready to get angry and say some stuff.
Hey,
thank you, sir.
Yeah, a preacher, fellow disciple making preacher once told me, he said, when the Holy Spirit comes on him, it's usually not to get him to do something, but to stop him from doing something. So yeah.
the Holy Spirit just stopped me through your interpretation.
All right.
From saying a lot of bad things that would have took this thing a different way. Thank you, my brother. I appreciate that.
No problem. No problem. All right. So here we go. The term handles of Torah refers to a parable. So in their culture, they probably, if they were in a rabbinic setting, Talmud disciple, they would say that's the handles of Torah, and they would proceed. So you might not see parable. But let me explain the Torah, because I'm using a Jewish word, and I want to make sure we understand. In the Jewish community, Torah does not mean law. Let me say that again with all caps. I will write that down if you're taking notes. In the Jewish community, Torah, let me say this, Torah does not equal law. Let me say it that way. In the Jewish community, Torah does not equal law. And I'll explain why. In the Jewish community, Torah does not equal law. And the reason being is Torah in the Jewish community simply means the teachings of God that hit the mark. Torah in the Jewish community simply means the teachings of God that hit the mark. Torah in the Jewish community simply means the teachings of God that hit the mark. Somebody give it back to us.
Well, you said Torah mean the teaching of God that hit in the Jewish community. Torah mean the teaching of God that hits the mark.
All right. Somebody else give it back to us. Thanks.
In the Jewish community, Torah does not equal law. The reason being, Torah in the Jewish community simply means the teaching of God that hits the mark.
All right, let me let Pastor Julius get some of this. Come on, Pastor Julius, I see you.
Yes, the teaching in the Jewish community, the Torah, the teaching of God, which hits the mark.
All right. And come on, give it to us one more time, John. I love for everybody to use John's words. All right. So let's add to what we have if we don't have it. Take it slow.
In the Jewish community, Torah does not equal law.
All right, let's repeat that a couple of times.
All right. In the Jewish community, Torah does not equal law. Let me say it one more time. In the Jewish community, Torah does not equal law. The reason being, Torah in the Jewish community simply means the teaching of God that hits the mark. The reason being, Torah in the Jewish community simply means the teaching of God that hits the mark. The teaching of God that hits the mark. Now let me go back and read the whole thing one more time, and then I'll be quiet. In the Jewish community, Torah does not equal law. The reason being, Torah in the Jewish community simply means the teaching of God that hits the mark.
All right. Excellent. Great job. Now somebody else get that back to us.
In the Jewish community, Torah does not equal the law. In the Jewish community, Torah means the teaching of God that hits the mark.
All right. Excellent. Somebody else give it back to us.
In the Jewish community, Torah does not equal law. The reason being, Torah in the Jewish community simply means the teachings of God that hits the mark.
Excellent. One more person. Get it back to us.
In the Jewish community, Torah does not equal law.
In the Jewish community, Torah does not equal law.
All right. Excellent.
In the Jewish community, Torah does not equal law. The reason being, Torah in the Jewish community simply means the teachings of God that hit the mark.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Thank you. All right. And I want to remind us still how valuable it will be for your spiritual growth process to listen to the recordings. So this recording, you'll be able to repeat, listen to, and it's going to accomplish a goal. You're not going to be confused about multiple meanings, multiple definitions, multiple applications and concepts. It's going to complete a goal to learn one Jewish concept, and that's what parables mean in the Jewish culture. And that gives us the interpretation of the meaning of a parable from a biblical worldview. And that means from God's lenses. All right, God's lens. All right, we'll know what parables are. So let me further explain this Torah. So in the Jewish community, Torah simply means teachings of God that hit the mark. And this is why. See, the word Torah is derived from a root word called yirah. I'll say that again. The word Torah is derived from the root word yirah. And let me give an example of your learning process that I just observed that Will Credit picked up on. If you know you have a teacher that's going to repeat definitions and words multiple times, the first time they explain it, I would just listen. I wouldn't immediately pick up my pen and try to capture every word. I would hear them out the first time in its entirety and watch how much faster you'll be able to write out the meaning of the word and retain it. All right, that's just a little nugget. So the word Torah was derived from a root word called Yerah. The word Torah was derived from a root word called Yerah, Y-A-R-A-H, Yerah, Y-A-R-A-H. The word Torah was derived from a root word called Yerah. Somebody repeat that back to us.
The word Torah was derived from a root word, Yerah.
Yes. All right, somebody
spell
else.
that Y, is them spelling it correct? Y-A-R-A, no, wait, sorry. Y-A-R-A-H.
Yes, sir.
That's correct. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Excellent. Thank you. All right, somebody else.
This is why, well, we have to remember, Torah in the Jewish community simply means the teaching of God that hits the mark. This is why. The word Torah is derived from a root word, Yerah.
Excellent. Somebody else.
The word Torah in the Jewish community simply means the teachings of God that hits the mark, and this is why. Torah was a word that was derived from a root word called Yerah.
Excellent, excellent, excellent.
Can you spell Yerah again, please?
All right, somebody spell Yerah for us.
Y-A-R-A-H.
Thank you.
Excellent.
You're welcome.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right. Now, this is what Yerah means. This is what Yerah means. This is what Yerah means. Yerah means to shoot an arrow or to send rain or to teach. Yerah means to shoot an arrow or to send rain or to teach. I'll say it one more time. Yerah means to shoot an arrow or to send rain or to teach. One more time. Yerah means to shoot an arrow or to send rain or to teach. Somebody get that back to us.
Yerah means to shoot an arrow or to send rain or to teach.
Excellent. Somebody else.
Yerah means to shoot an arrow or to send rain or to teach.
Excellent. Somebody else.
Yerah means to shoot an arrow, to send rain, or to teach.
All right, one more time. Somebody else.
This is what Yerah means. Yerah means to shoot an arrow or to send rain or to teach.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Thank you. All right, excellent. So here we go. The context determines which meaning is applied. The context determines which meaning is applied. The context determines which meaning is applied. One more time. The context determines which meaning is applied. Last time. The context determines which meaning is applied. Somebody give it back.
The context determines which meaning is applied.
Excellent. Somebody else.
The context determines which meaning is applied.
Excellent. One more person.
The context determines which meaning is applied.
All right, now let's have a quick discussion.
Which meaning is applied?
Excellent, excellent. So I want somebody, one person, I'm gonna go through, somebody explain how we determine the context of Uriah from what we just learned. I want somebody to try to explain that.
I have a question so I'll be able to answer.
Okay.
So you said explain the context of the word Uriah, or how to determine what it means.
How to determine what it means. We've just learned what Uriah means. It means to shoot an arrow, or to send rain, or to teach. But we also learned that the context determines which meaning is applied. Somebody give me a scenario and explain how we do this.
Oh, so that's reading the pretext, right?
Uh-huh.
And the post-text.
Okay.
So
All right. Yeah. Reading the pretext and the post-text. Anybody want to give us an illustration? Can you create an illustration of how you determine which meaning is applied? Let me give an example. If I was an archer or a hunter, and I'm in the woods or the wilderness, and my family is depending on me to bring back some food so we can skin and cook it. And I say, I need to Uriah to kill the deer. What did I say?
You need to shoot an arrow.
All right, excellent. Can anybody else create another scenario or illustration of how we determine the meaning for Uriah in the context of a sentence?
Okay, I got one, I think.
If I'm a farmer.
Give me 1 second, John. We're gonna let Ayana give. She started off first.
Okay, when I'm gonna need some water for my crops, so I need Uriah for my crops to grow.
Excellent. That's
Okay.
it. Yeah. All right, come on, John.
My example was teaching.
Your
I'm
internet
a
kind of
rabbi.
faltered.
Uriah.
Hey, John, your internet faltered on us.
I'm moved.
I think you might be on the move. Anybody else until John get back to us? Can anybody use it? Come on, brother.
If you teaching, I would tell a person you need to repent from your ways. Maybe not correct, but you need to repent from your ways. I'm gonna teach you that. You know, I don't know how I would teach a person that though. You know?
All right.
But I would just say to you, I would just use the scripture that Jesus said when he said in Matthew 4:17, repent because the kingdom of heaven is near.
Yeah. Now that's an example of how you can give instructions.
Okay.
But in what similar way that we just saw, I gave and Ayana gave, if we use the word Uriah in a sentence, so it can mean teaching. Let me give an example. If a wise instructor is instructing his students and he says, I need to Uriah the example of what this is. What did he tell his students?
Well, he's gonna teach them.
Yes, 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 yes. So this is the root of Torah. So we know anytime a Jewish person is using the word Torah, it's referring to teachings. It's so this is why we understand that Torah in the Jewish community simply means the teachings of God that hit the target. All right.
Okay, then, Houston.
Yes, sir.
Let me just ask you then. So if I tell my son I need to arrive you on how to be a good husband.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. I need to teach you how to be a good husband. Excellent.
I have a question.
Excellent.
So I have a question. So the Torah, you said, is basically they would know, the Jewish people would know that it simply means just to teach, not to shoot an arrow or to send rain.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Now let me add to that. That may be a little confusing or challenging, but I want you to make the connection. All right. So we listen up first. So wise disciple makers, wise rabbis, in their culture, they called them sages, wise sages, or teachers of the law, teachers of Torah. S-A-G-E-S represents a wise teacher of Torah in our culture. S-A-G-E-S, sages. And a sage was a wise rabbi or a wise disciple maker. I'll say that again. In our culture, S-A-G-E-S, sage, represents a wise rabbi, an experienced rabbi, an experienced disciple maker. Experienced rabbis, wise teachers, taught their students to lean towards metaphorical meanings. I'll say that again. Wise sages, experienced rabbis, taught their students to lean towards metaphorical meanings. Somebody get that back. Wise sages, experienced rabbis, taught their students to lean towards metaphorical meanings. Say it one more time. Wise sages, experienced rabbis, taught their students to lean towards metaphorical meanings.
You want us to repeat it?
Yes, sir. Give it back.
Okay. Wise sage, experienced rabbi taught their student to lean towards metaphorical meaning.
Excellent. Somebody else give it back to us.
Wise sages, experienced rabbis taught the students to lean towards metaphorical meanings.
All right, one more person. Give it back to us.
Sages represent a wise rabbi, an experienced rabbi, or disciple maker. Wise sages, experienced rabbis, wise sages and experienced rabbis taught their students to lean toward metaphorical meaning.
Excellent, 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 excellent. Now let me explain why. A metaphorical meaning represents the transcendency of God better than a literal meaning does. A metaphorical meaning represents the transcendency of God better than a literal meaning does. A metaphorical meaning represents the transcendency of God better than a literal meaning does. A metaphorical meaning represents the transcendency of God better than a literal meaning does. Somebody get that back to us.
This is why metaphorical represents the transcendence of God better than a literal meaning does.
Yes, yes. Somebody else give it back to us.
This is why a metaphorical meaning represents the transcendency of God better than a literal meaning does.
All right, excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, so God is invisible. God is an inanimate object. God is omnipotent. All right. God is infinite. So if God gives us a meaning, a literal meaning represents something finite. A literal meaning represents something animate. All right. A literal meaning represents it places a literal meaning places God in a box. So to avoid placing God in this small box of finitism, animation, they use metaphorical meanings to represent a transcendent God. They use metaphorical meanings to represent a transcendent God. All right. And so they, in other words, they taught their disciples to lean towards metaphorical meanings because it better represents the transcendency of God. Any comments or questions or reflections on that?
That's deep.
Casey.
That's very deep.
So
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Will. So an example, just for my understanding, a metaphorical meaning would be, when we're reading the Psalms, David wrote several of Psalms, and they refer to God as my rock, my fortress. God is my salvation. Those are metaphorical meanings as opposed to, that.
Yes.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
so
okay.
so now you don't just look at what he was saying is, if God is my rock, then God represents stability. But to apply God as my rock, it's saying more than just stability, right? It's the firmness of something, it's the unbreakable concept of something else. It's the a rock can last ages and ages and ages or something. You see what I'm saying? So now to explain a rock, the metaphorical explanation of a rock gives you several explanations and descriptions about a rock. A rock in any place. You got to look at the place the rock is in and describe what the rock is doing. It's just like God. You got to look at the situation God is in and describe what he was doing. And metaphorical meanings better represent that ability.
So in the ears of the listener, the metaphorical meaning just means a whole lot more. It's just like, especially in that culture, they immediately recognize the metaphor, basically.
Yes, and you just said a great definition. The metaphorical meaning just represents a whole lot more. If we want to write anything down, I say write that. They use metaphorical meanings because it represents a whole lot more than the literal meaning did.
So then the literal meaning, like you said, would place God in a box.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But the metaphor would expand, I mean, into infinite. You know, it
Yes.
just goes forever and ever. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
So
Anybody
does
else?
it mean,
Go ahead. Come on, Winnie.
so does it mean that the metaphorical meaning gives you, explains God in different ways?
Yes.
Like gives you a wider view of how God is, right?
Yes, exactly. I like that. So it gives you the ability to explain God in a wider view, in more than one way. Yes. 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 Anybody else? Anybody else want to take a stab at summarizing that?
I'll take a shot at it.
All right.
A literal meaning places God in a finite box. Metaphorical meaning represents a whole lot more than a literal meaning. The metaphorical meaning gives an ability to explain God in more than one way.
Yeah, good, 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 good. And let me give us one last thought. It just takes God out of a box and it places the box under him. It takes God out of a box and it places the box under him. It takes God out of the box and it places the box under him. All right.
Metaphorically speaking, you can say it takes God out of the box and makes the box his footstool.
Yes, there you go. There you go. There you go. All right. All right. Now, remember we explain all of that to better understand how Torah's root word Yerah explains the meaning of Torah in the Jewish culture. Remember, Torah in the Jewish culture simply means the teachings of God that hit the mark. Therefore, the metaphorical meaning of Torah from the root word Yerah represents the metaphorical meaning of Torah from the root word Yerah. The metaphorical meaning of Torah from the root word Yerah. I'll say it again. The metaphorical meaning of Torah from the root word Yerah. One more time. The metaphorical meaning of Torah from the root word Yerah. The metaphorical meaning of Torah from the root word Yerah simply represents the teachings of God as one who shoots an arrow to hit a mark. Simply represents the teachings of God as one who shoots an arrow to hit the mark. It simply represents the teachings of God as one who shoots an arrow to hit a mark. It simply represents the teachings of God as one who shoots an arrow to hit a mark or hit the mark? Somebody want to get that back to us?
Metaphorical meaning of Torah from the root word Yarah simply represents the teachings of God as one who shoots the arrow to hit a mark.
Excellent, excellent. Somebody else give it back.
The metaphorical meaning of Torah from the root word Yarah simply represents the teachings of God as one who shoots an arrow to hit the mark.
Excellent, excellent. Somebody else.
The metaphorical meaning of Torah from the root word Yarah simply represents the teachings of God as one who shoots an arrow to hit the mark.
Excellent, excellent. Now, have you guys noticed how your ability to take notes have increased during this short amount of time?
I've noticed.
All right. And watch it continues to build as you move forward and apply the same technique. Usage and practice is instrumental in a learning style and growth. And that's all we're doing. That's all we're representing here. All right. That's all we're doing. So excellent job. Excellent, excellent, excellent. And watch how much more you excel after you re-listen to the audio and video of this particular teaching. All right. Excellent.
Mr. Kelsey, I have a question.
All right.
I'm confused because the literal meaning of Torah would be the teachings of God, and the metaphorical meaning would be the one who the teachings of God and as one who shoots the arrow to hit the mark.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Did you have more to add to that question or what? Oh, you got it. If that was your question, you got it. You understand.
Okay, I got it.
All right. Yeah, you got it. Exactly. All right. Because now let's think about it. Let's play it. Let's play the real in our mind. When God gave Moses the Torah, it was his teachings, his instructions. It was his teachings and instructions on how he wanted them to live out this lifestyle that creates a standard that they didn't know about. It was this lifestyle that created a standard that they didn't know about. God wanted them to live out this lifestyle according to this standard. And so he gave them the Torah. But the way he gave it to them was to show them, like an archer shoots an arrow and hits the target, his teachings began to show them how to hit the target of the standard. This is where sin comes in, because as soon as I miss the standard, I've missed the mark, which causes me to fall short of his glory and sin. Now, does everybody see how those concepts have been played out in the New Testament scripture all of this time?
Well, that's what sin means, is to miss the mark, right?
Yes. Now we see where it came from. We see the origin of the definition of sin. The origin of the definition came out of the opposite of sin, which is to hit the mark. Missing the mark equals sin. Hitting the mark equals spiritual success of application of God's teaching.
but we've all fallen short, which is why Christ is the only person that ever hit the mark, which is why we have to be in Christ in order to have salvation.
Now watch this, which is why we're disciples of Christ, because a disciple of somebody else does what?
They do what their rabbi teaches them to do.
Yes, somebody else had another explanation. They do what?
Well, I think they teach the word exactly as the disciple. They interpret the word exactly as the disciple had, or the rabbi had interpreted to them.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
But let's think about living it out. So I'm a disciple of a rabbi imitates his rabbi. So if Jesus was the only one to live this out by hitting the mark, as a disciple of Jesus, I do exactly what I see and hear my rabbi do. It gives me a better chance to hit the mark myself. This is why we first position ourselves to be his disciples. We'll be better successful, because if he's only Christ, I'm not thinking about repeating exactly and being exactly who he was and modeling what he did, imitating him. But if I'm thinking about being his disciple, I am, because it's the expectation of the position. I'm more successful. This is why the Bible referred to you as disciples and to me as disciples of Christ first. It positions us to be more successful in life, period.
Well, he's the gold. He's the gold record.
He's the gold, solid gold record. Let me close by explaining that. All right. So at some point back in the day, vinyl records were used. Vinyl records were used. All right. And to create a vinyl record, you first have to create a mold that's solid gold. The mold is melted, the mold is made, the material is, the gold is melted down inside of the mold. The mold is placed to cast the imprint of the original record. It's solid gold. Once it hardens, you can't destroy it unless it's heated up again. So now you have this solid gold record, and they take the solid gold record, and every time they want to make a copy of it, they put the solid gold record and they make a copy of the vinyl from the solid gold. Each vinyl record, therefore, is made from the solid gold record. If you take the vinyl record to try to make a copy, the copy will be marred. The only way you can make a copy for it to play exactly what the solid gold record is you have to take the solid gold record and make a copy from it, which is why Paul said, imitate me as I imitate the solid gold record. Every copy, therefore, is made from the solid gold record of Jesus Christ. Understand? Reflections and thoughts.
So that means that the goal of a disciple is to be exactly like the rabbi himself, right?
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's very important that your rabbi, well, what's really important is what you're teaching us is how to interpret the scriptures, how to be in the scriptures, so that we can understand the counterfeit. I mean, if you know, so we know the truth. And that's what's exciting, you know, because you could, you know, Hare Krishnas have disciples too, you know, but they're not Christian, but they, you know, so yeah, so we want to go after the gold record. And Casey, you are a wonderful disciple maker. So glad I met you years ago.
Man, appreciate you. Appreciate you. Any reflections? We're about out of time. So let's start to reflect on what we learned today. Any reflections, feedbacks from you guys?
I have one. It's weird, but like when you said about the parables are the handles of Torah, like it just made me realize how deep and how important they saw out parables, and like because as I visualize handles on and holding up anything, I'm like, wow, it's really deep. So yeah, that's what I'm reflecting on, the importance of it.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Excellent. Anybody else? Thank you.
Well, you don't show us what the importance of being under a good teacher. Because if you're not under a good teacher, you're gonna get it wrong every time. Every time. It ain't no way around it.
So true.
It ain't gonna come out right, you know, because the teacher himself is following the wrong thing. But when you under some teacher like I'm under you, and I'm learning, gonna be all I got to do. I don't have to guess up on it. All I got to do is be exactly like you teach. And I can't make a mistake when I'm teaching someone else, because the product that you have produced in me is not a wimp, not a fake. You produce in me somebody who is I don't know how, I don't want to brag and I don't want to exalt myself, but I have learned to humble myself. And then with your teaching, I teach it exactly like you. And as I started this conversation out this morning, someone else seen that in me. And I didn't tell them that you was my teacher, but I told them, yes, I appreciate it. So I appreciate every moment that we had today, because you have broken down. There's no way that I don't know what a parable is now. There's no way. I don't have, I got to take that off the table, because I know what a parable is. Now, I'm not going to even watch football today. I'm just going to be studying this all day. I thank you, man.
All right, man. All right. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. Anybody else? Any feedback, comments?
Yeah, I'm with Will. I appreciate the fact that you spent this time today just focusing on the definition of a parable, because we've studied it for a long time. And as I was going back through some of my notes, I did have, I'm just glad we're all together. We all have exactly what you wrote down. We've copied it down, word for word. Now we all know what a parable is, or at least we have this recording to go to if we ever forget, if we can't find our notes. So thanks for taking the time, Casey, taking 2.5, 3 hours preparing for the teaching so that you could share it with us. And it's been most helpful.
I appreciate it. Now let me share some insight to you all. I want to hear more from you. We're only halfway through the definition.
I knew it. I knew it.
Man.
We only halfway through.
Well, that's exciting. It'll be great next week.
All right. So yeah. All right. But great job. All right. Yeah. But great job. So I appreciate anybody, any other comments or reflections.
I want to say something. I'm trying to go back to school, and it's just crazy that this is really helping me get prepared to go back. True. I would think it would be the other way around, but no, this is really helping me take notes more effectively, and repetition is key, because our professors don't really, well, my professors in school don't really tell me that And so thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
Oh yeah, you're exactly right. It will make you a better student. All right. And always take your recording to class. Always take your recording to class. I saw that way back. I ain't gonna tell you what year I was in school, but I used to see maybe one or two people in a class, and it was usually a class where, you know, this professor was known as, everybody didn't like him because he was known as, he was just an oral teacher. He just taught, didn't repeat himself, close the time, tell you to go back, give you some reading assignment. He didn't even read the book in class. It was like, why did I spend all this money on buying this book? I ain't seen this joker pick up the book one time in class. But when he gave them exams, it was stuff he taught in school, in class, and in the book. And those recordings, if I knew to record then, oh man. So I always take your recording. But this learning style does help you take notes better for people like that. So yeah, it will make you a better student. So yeah. All right. Well, anybody else?
Yeah, I was gonna say that even just watching how you teach and how easier it was for everyone to receive was a good reminder. Like, even though I know repetition is key and I know it's important to take notes, but it's just helped me realize that I still have that habit of teaching too fast and going too fast. And it's hard to slow yourself down because our culture is so used to just spitting out a lecture and just going fast. And if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. And so just feel like chiseling that off, chiseling that habit out of me and learning like how to teach the way even the rabbis taught, where they knew their disciples got it, or how to teach in a way where it's not about what I'm giving, but it's not about like me saying what I need to say. It's really making sure that the students are getting it, and that shows how much I really care about them, is making sure that they are getting it. And that's what we're lacking in our culture. So I think I was really able to see that clearly in how you taught today.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. All right, we got time for at least one, maybe two more before we sign off. We're a little over our time, but if anybody has any reflections, we'll hear from you. Anybody else? All righty. Well, it's been great. That's our time. I did the